is the host of Everything Everywhere Daily. Please do welcome Gary Arndt.
In 2007, I sold my home to travel around the world, a journey that took me 13 years of living out of a smelly bag. And while you're on the road like that, you have a lot of free time. And I started listening to podcasts. And the first podcast I found was the biggest travel podcast in the world, and in 2007, the only travel podcast in the world, The Amateur Traveler. And I devoured every episode of that podcast, listening to some twice. And eventually, I worked up the gumption to email the host and see if I could be a guest on his show. So in 2008, I was sitting in an internet cafe in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. I was a guest on The Amateur Traveler, achieving my dream, talking about the nation of Micronesia. And since then, I've been a guest on the show almost 20 times. I consider myself the caulking of the Amateur Traveler podcast, talking about little places like Liechtenstein, the island of St. Helena. But since Chris has started the show, he's done a little under 1,000 episodes. And he has not only given travel advice, but has inspired hundreds of thousands of people around the world to travel, and has led his own travels and tours with his listeners to places all around the world. In 2009, I got to meet Chris for the first time in person. We were at an event called TBEX, which was the very first travel blogger conference. And I pitched him an idea. I was like, how would you like to start a podcast with me called This Week in Travel, loosely based on This Week in Tech. We talk about travel every week. So me, Chris, and our other co-host, Jen Leo, who was writing for the Los Angeles Times at the time, we began doing this show. And for 11 years, until this thing called the pandemic killed it, we did This Week in Travel. And I got to tell you, if we had a dime for every dime we made, we would have 0 dimes. But that show introduced a new world to us, because we had people like Samantha Brown, Pauline Fromer, Josh Gates, big people in that industry who were willing to come on the show. We keynoted conferences together. And even though we didn't make any money, it's the example I always use to people that a podcast doesn't have to make money. It can do a lot for you. And during that time, Chris was always doing The Amateur Traveler, growing his audience. And I have to say, even though Chris has impeccable Hall of Fame credentials, he is not a perfect podcaster. In 2013, we were doing an episode of This Week in Travel that I couldn't be on. And you know what I'm talking about. I was going to be visiting the Łaciewska salt mine outside Krakow, Poland, so I couldn't be on the show. But I go down to the mine, and at the gift shop, a mile beneath the surface of the earth, I see they have Wi-Fi. So I pull out my iPod Touch, which gives you an idea of how old it is, and I call into the show as they're recording it. Creating podcasting history, I think, recording a podcast a mile underneath the earth. And I would like to tell you where you could listen to this podcast, except Chris did not hit record. I have had the pleasure of recording podcasts with Chris in 9 different countries on 3 different continents. Chris has keynoted or spoken, I don't even know how many travel conferences he's been to. He's received pretty much every award there is for podcasting that can be done in travel. He has literally become the voice of the travel industry. And so it is my sincere pleasure to induct into the Podcasting Hall of Fame the man so nice they named him twice, Mr. Chris Christensen.
I would like to say that's the last time that I failed to hit record. It's happened this year. First of all, special thanks to the video audio crew for the extra promotional time for Amateur Traveler. I appreciate that. It was the best $20 I've spent so far on promotion. I'm Chris, and I'm a podcaster. And I say that because I assumed that this was an intervention. But before I get to serious, actually, I do want to thank some people. Mostly, I want to thank my very patient wife, who's had to deal with me disappearing, not just upstairs into my podcast studio, ever since July of 2005, but also at various places around the world at times. And then special thanks to our listeners of the show and the patrons of the show who help support it. When I started podcasting, I chose the name Amateur Traveler, and I chose it for two reasons. One is that I didn't spend enough time looking for a good domain. And the other is that I like the word amateur, which means to do something for the love of it. And I will, people say, are you still an amateur? And it's when I stop being an amateur, I will stop doing this. This is quite possibly the most elaborate practical joke that I've ever heard, Rob Greenlee, or at least that's what I thought when Rob called me. I'm honored, I am pleased. Thank you to all the other inductees and to the Hall of Fame. It is not the weirdest thing that has happened to me because of podcasting, though. Probably the top three, I got invited to the Obama White House by the National Security Agency. Didn't see that coming. I got a chance to be paparazzi for the Pope for the day in Jordan as the Pope and the royal family visited the baptism site of Jesus. And just to clarify, this is not the same Pope who made peace in the travel podcasting community by splitting the world between Lou and I, where Lou got Disney and I got everything else. This is a later Pope than that. There was a time that if you went to get a job with the Thailand Foreign Ministry, you were required to listen to 2 episodes of Amateur Traveler as part of their English comprehension exam. Might still be the case for all I know. It's been used to teach English in Oxford University, the German and the Canadian school system also. And right now, if you fly home, if you're on one of 7 or 8 different airlines, you'll see it on the seatback entertainment system. So there's been some cool stuff that has happened, but not every day. Anybody who's been doing this for this long knows that there are the other days. There are days that you're doing a travel podcast and there's a global pandemic, but there are also the days where you get that 1-star review from the person who says, I have listened to this show for 3 years and I can't stand it anymore. 1 star and goodbye. The people who suggest that I should get a different host. I'm not sure who they think they're writing to, but what I hear in there is, I love what you do, I just hate you. And there are days like that. When I go on from this show, I'm actually flying to New York State, to New York City, and I'm going to the International Media Marketplace Conference, and I will be pitching Amateur Traveler to a lot of destinations around the world, why they should have me come and do a podcast about their destination. And I am not meeting with most of the people I wanted to meet with because they would rather talk to somebody from Travel and Leisure magazine or somebody who is basically writing on dead trees. Even though, if you look at the stats, the number of subscribers over the last 5 years for print magazines has dropped in half in the last 5 years, while podcasting, as we know, is doing okay. So my struggles in the travel industry with trying to convince people that podcasting is a thing are not over yet. But my joys in the travel industry with podcasting are also not over yet. This is a wonderful milestone, a tremendous honor, but also just a milestone as I continue to do what I love to do. Thanks so much.